Hi, this is Sean Hafer, and in this tutorial we'll be going through a really quick overview of After Effects just to see where things are and get things started. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and open After Effects. As that opens, you'll see your usual Adobe opening screen, and there'll be a sort of recent files, etc. type of screen like usual. So as this comes up, all right, so here we've got our sort of opening screen where you've got your recent files, et cetera, et cetera. You can do a new project, open project. I'm gonna go ahead and just close that here so we can see After Effects as it opens. Now, I'm going to go and use the default layout. So when you come in here, basically come over and click on your default up here. And then just to make sure, I'm going to also go click on my little hamburger icon and click Reset to Save Layout. So that'll make sure we're all in the same sort of view. And there's multiple views you can use as you start doing different tasks in After Effects, but right now we'll all do the default for this little tutorial. Okay, so real quick, what's going on in here is we've got our different windows, we've got our toolbar up top, we've got our project window. This will be where all of our assets go. So this will be everything from images to Illustrator files and vector files, audio files, movie files, video files. All of that lives in this little zone here. This will be our composition window. This is where we will see what our final output is going to be. And a composition in After Effects is basically like a mini project. So in After Effects, you can only have one project open at a time, but in each project, you can have multiple compositions. So a composition is basically one timeline. You can have many, many layers inside of that, and you can actually even have other compositions, which are called nested compositions, inside of those compositions as well. In this tutorial, we won't be getting into that, but that's something I'll definitely cover in a later tutorial. So this will be where our composition window is. Over here is kind of our different panels. So we've got audio, effects and presets, character, all of these different things, just like Illustrator, Photoshop, all of that. And back when I first started using After Effects, like version 3.1, really we used to refer to it as Photoshop with a timeline. And now it's a little more like Photoshop and Illustrator with a timeline. There's features from both. A lot of the things you can do in both of those programs, you can do in After Effects, but animated. So we can do a lot of things and change them over time and do some really cool things. So then with all these panels here, down below here is our timeline. And this is basically where all of our layers will be over here that we are using. And then here's where our timeline will be. As I said before, the main working unit that we use is the composition. So we can create a new comp multiple ways. We come up here to composition, new composition. We can hit Command or Control N. We can come over here and click on this create a new composition here. It's like the little icon that looks like a frame of film down here. And then when you first open After Effects, you can just click New Composition here. But this is only when you first open it and you have nothing loaded. So I'm going to go ahead and click New Composition. And now we can see there's a lot of settings. So we want to set up our composition to be the final output that we're going to need. If it's going to be a video project, it might be a 1080p project, which would mean it's 1920 by 1080. If we pull down under presets, you can see we've got plenty of options. So there's our 1080, 24 frames per second is what that 24 stands for. That's 24 frames per second is the frame rate of film. Then down here, we've got the same thing, 1080 at 29.97. That's television. There also is a smaller sort of HD setting that's 720. So we can do those as well. As small ones. So you might hear 720p, 1080p, those are there. Here's some 4K settings, even 8K settings. And then we've got some of our older TV used to be 640 by 480 NTSC, so those there. But usually we'll be inside of that 720 or 1080 unless we're doing a custom type thing. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my HDTV 1080 24. So that's telling us here. Now we've got our name up here. So I'm just going to call this intro. And I come down here, that's all fine. Square pixels, frame rate 24 preset for us. Now here is where your duration of your timeline is. Now you can change this easily. You can change this and add to it or take away time in your composition, but it's usually a good idea to sort of start somewhere where you think you want to be. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 5 seconds. Now the way this is set up, it is hours, then that colon, then minutes, the colon, seconds, the colon, and then frames. And so that frame is based on our frame rate. So here it would be 0 to 23. If we had 30 frames a second, it would be 0 to 29, and then that would turn to 1, etc. You don't have to type the colons when you type in here. So if I wanted 5 seconds, I could just do 5.0. And then if I hit tab, I'm out of there, and boom, there we go. We're at 5 seconds. Background color. Your background color doesn't render that color, but it might just be something you want while you're working. So background color, I'm just going to leave as black, but I'll show you once we open the comp that it's really actually transparent. So that's all good there. We are ready to go. I'm going to hit OK. Now, what I'm going to do also is save this file. So I'm going to go up, and again, we've got our project, which is right still untitled project up here. But then we'll have these comps in here, but I want to save my project file. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and then just pick where we're going to save it. I'll do it on the desktop, and I'm just going to call it Intro AE. Okay, so now we've got this up. We can see a lot of things sort of happen. We've now got a composition over here called Intro in our project window. We now have our timeline, so we can see here it is going from 0 to 5 seconds, and we can see even these sort of half-second marks of 12 frames. So there would be 24 frames to 1 second, another 24 to 2, etc. And over here we don't have any layers, so we don't have anything in here, but we can get to that next. So there's lots of different things we can do. We can import different file types in here. We can create vector shapes, and we can create bitmap shapes. We can also create text. So what I'm going to do, let's just start off with some text, and we'll talk about our basic properties that we use inside of After Effects. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my text tool here and just click in my center, and I'm going to just type DAP. All right, and I'm going to double click that. And if I go over here and I hit my character window, I can see I'm in Universe. You can pick any font you want. I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bigger. And I am going to check all that. That's fine. And I'm going to click on my paragraph down here, and I'm going to center justify it. Okay, so we'll have that there. So I've got that. Now I can go in, and we've got our text tool, just like Photoshop or Illustrator. We've got our selection tool, which is also a shortcut of V. So I'm going to select that, and now we can see we've got DAP. Now we can grab these corners, and we can stretch our type and do things that way. I'm going to undo those. We also have this little icon here, which is our anchor point. So this is where things will scale from. This is where things will rotate around. And we'll go through all of those in just a second. Since I center justified this, we've got it in the center. If I would left justify it, we can see that that center point jumps to that point. So I'm going to go ahead and back center justify. We also have an align tab up here where I can go ahead and align layers to the composition, and you can tell what you're doing there because it says composition. And I'm going to align that, and I'm also going to align it vertically. So now we've got it right in the center. Now what is in the center is our type. So let's look at what we can do with this. So we've got 5 main properties inside of After Effects for a layer. So that are always created. So if I roll down under my DAP layer here, and we've got our text, and we can see we've got some things we can do with text, but I'm going to roll down the transforms. And you can see we've got anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. A good way to remember those is parts because anchor point is A, shortcut, position is P, scale is S, rotation is R, and opacity is T. So think transparency. P-A-R-T-S, parts. It's a way I remember them, but you can go that however you want. When we go through here, we can see we've got our position. So let's say our position here, we can see that is at the sort of center of our world. But if we scrub on those, we can move it up and down. So it's X and Y. Here we're going X, Y, okay? We can always hit reset to bring it back to where it was before we changed anything. We can check our scale. So again, if we wanted to scale it up, we could scale this, scale it down. I'm going to undo that. We've got the link. So if you only want to scale the Y, you could do that and scale those separately, but we'll just keep those linked for now. We've got rotation, and like I said, it rotates around the anchor point, right? So right now it's rotating from the center. If I wanted to change my anchor point, I can come up here to the pan behind tool, which is the anchor point tool, or hit Y. If I click on this, I'm also going to click on snapping. And now we can move this easily to snap to the different corners, snap to the center, snap to wherever you want. So if you think here, if I'm going to scale now, it's going to scale from the center, right? It scales from the anchor point. If I'm going to rotate now, it's going to rotate from the center. So any of those two parameters that you want to change, those properties, you want to go ahead and know where your anchor point is. If we wanted something to scale in from the side, we could come in and sort of have it, scale up like that. Same thing if we wanted it to rotate from its corner, right? If it was going to come in here, we start rotating, we could rotate it just around its corner. So that's the importance of where the anchor point is and where we set things. So I'm going to go ahead and snap that to the center. You can also right-click on a layer and come to your transform and go to center anchor point in layer content, or Control Alt Home or Command Option Home on a Mac. And that will bring it in as well. So you've got those options. Now, if you don't want to see all of these, if you have a lot of layers and it gets really filled up really fast, it can get really complicated. What we can do is just hit those letters I said before. So if I just want position, I can hit P. If I want my anchor point, A. Rotation is R. T for opacity. And S for scale. And if I need multiples of those, I can hold down Shift and add one. So if I add Shift P, I get position. If I also want to add in rotation, Shift R, and I get rotation. All right. Now all of these can be animated, and you can tell if they can be animated because they have this little stopwatch besides them. So if I come in here and I said wanted to move, let me go to V for my selection tool. Let's say I wanted to move the snap up from the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to scroll my scroll wheel out, or you can come over here. This is just your view, so I could go to 50%, or you can go fit up to 100%. I'm going to bring it back down to 25 so I can see. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag this down outside of my window. All right, so we can still see it's there, but it's not. This is the only area that gets rendered. Inside of our composition window, we have a few things that we can use as guides. We could come in here and turn on some grids. So if I come here and I look at, there's a title and action safe grid. So for video content, this is your action safe area. This is your title safe area. There is a proportional grid. So if you want to look at sort of your, thirds, that's an easy one to go there. There is a regular grid that you can set in preferences, so you can set that to break down however you want and snap to that if you need to. And then there's also your regular guides, and you can show your rulers. So if you have your rulers, you can add guides just by dragging things, just like you would in Illustrator or Photoshop. And we can get rid of those. Just turning those off, and we're good to go there. So a lot of similarities to other Adobe products, and we can go ahead and turn off our rulers if we want to. But we can always see this right here. Like I said before, this is still transparent officially. It will render as black, but if you rendered it out as a series of pings or in a video codec that supports transparency, it would be transparent. And the way you can check that is toggle the transparency grid, and just like Photoshop, we can see that that is actually transparent. All right, and we'll get to some of the other things on here in other tutorials as we move forward. So let's make some stuff move. So we've got our DAP here, and what we want to do is let's do position first. So I'm going to hit P for position, and I am going to come in and set a keyframe. So a keyframe is one moment in time. So it will freeze one moment of time of whatever we set a keyframe for. So to start recording keyframes, we hit our stopwatch here in position. And if you don't see position, you can either roll everything down and see all of them inside transform, or again, just hit P and position will show up. So now you can see it's there, and it created this little diamond right here. Now, if I move forward, I'm going to go up to about 2 seconds. And I'm going to click on here, hold Shift, and drag up my DAP. All right, you can see it created a new keyframe automatically for us. Now, if you ever come back and hit this again, it will erase all your keyframes. You're basically turning that off. If you turn it back on, it'll just set one where you are. So if you accidentally turn that off, I'm going to go ahead and undo, and now I've got both my keyframes. So if I play this back, and then you can play back by hitting your space bar, we see this really slow DAP. Very exciting, but there it is. We've got some animation happening. Now let's say we wanted that to also fade up while it was coming up. So let's come back to this beginning. And the shortcut for that, if you want to jump back to the beginning, is home. So if you hit home on your keyboard, that will take you back to the beginning of your comp. So we've got home, and I'm back at the beginning. And now let's go ahead and hit T for opacity or transparency. And I'm going to go ahead and set a keyframe here. So at 100%, but I'm going to bring it down to 0. So I can either click, type 0, enter, or I could scrub it down. And then I'm going to move forward. And let's go a little bit before 1 second. And let's go ahead and bring this up to 100. All right, so we're here. It's fading up. There we go. Or we can make that 1 second. Let's go ahead and just put that at 1 second halfway through. And you can see, you can just easily move keyframes around. Now, if I wanted to see my position again, I could hit Shift P like I did before. Another great shortcut is if you hit U, it will just roll down any different properties that you have set keyframes for. So if I hit U now, I can see that my position has a keyframe at 0 and 2 seconds, and then opacity has one at 1 second. So now let's also throw in, let's do a little scale. So I'm going to hit Shift and S for my scale. Let's roll it back or hit home, and let's set that a keyframe there. All right, so there I'm at 0, and let's make that, let's bring it down to about 50%. And now we'll go forward again. And let's go to about 1.5 seconds. And we can see where we're at time-wise by one right here. We've got it. 1 second, 12 frames. Over here it is big and blue. 1 second, 12 frames. And I'll go ahead and set this back up to 100. So now what's happening is it's fading up. It's hitting full opacity and it's scaling up. Full opacity there, full scale there, and then coming into space. So if we play this, it's kind of janky, huh? It's not looking the best. So again, as we do all of these things, we can always move keyframes. So if we wanted to bring this down, we could say that seems great. Let's have them both hit at the same time. But these are what's called linear keyframes. And an easy way to add ease, so ease in, ease out, one of our principles of animation, is we can apply what's called an easy ease. So there's a couple ways to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and just click and drag around my keyframes. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit F9, or I can right click, go to Keyframe Assistant, and hit Easy Ease. And this will change. Now we can see they're no longer diamonds, they're little hourglasses. And what this does, it allows our keyframes to ease to a stop. See how now we get a nice ease instead of that linear. So a lot nicer, feels good. Now, if we want to do something crazy, let's throw a little rotation in, and we will go ahead and this time we'll know we want it to rotate to end here at that rotation. So we're at 2 seconds. And so we'll go ahead and hit Shift R to add a rotation. And then let's go ahead, turn that on there at 0. And then we'll go back here and we've got basically degrees and then revolutions. So if we do 360 degrees, it's going to then roll over to 1 revolution. So you can do that either any way you want. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit 1 and I'll do 0. So it'll do 1 full revolution as it comes up. And we get that coming in. And now we did an easy ease those. So let's go ahead, select those two. I just shift selected, shift clicked, and I'll hit F9. Now we'll get some nice eases. And we will get a little more into how you can really control those eases and get everything looking a lot nicer. So there's that. That's coming into play. And let's say now we worked this out. We want it a little quicker. So what we could do is just grab, our keyframes out here and drag them down a little. And then maybe just grab these and drag them down. And now that'll be faster, right? So it'll end a little before 1.5 seconds. Now, when we bring in our layers, they also you can move these in time as well. So basically this red line is the layer for DAP, and that's based on this color. And you can change these by just clicking on that little swatch. So if we wanted this to be purple, lavender, right? So if you want to organize your layers by color, that's a great way to stay organized. And as we go through here, we can look and say, I could have this just start, not even appear until 1 second. So if I roll back here, it won't even start until 1 second, right? So that's just one way of knowing if you want to have things appear or start at a certain time. So we can move the layers that way. So just undo to get that back so it starts at the beginning. Now we can also have things end the same way. So if we bring this here, it's going to run out. Now the keyframes are still there, but this is just saying this is as long as the clip is, right? This is as long as the layer is. So if we wanted to have this end at 2 seconds and just vanish, we could do that, hit play, and then it's just going to vanish. So that's another thing there. So if we wanted to, we could just have it end there. But what we'll do is just say, let's have this, we want our whole comp to maybe end at 2 seconds. Because right now, if we went to render this, it would render 5 seconds, but we'd have about 2.5 seconds, actually 3.5 seconds of black at the end. So what we can do, if we want to trim our comp, or we want to just render a certain area, we've got our entire comp here, but we also have a work area. So that is this guy right here. So if I move this to 2 seconds, and now I've got my time indicator in here, if I hit play here, it'll just loop to that place. And you can click in the middle and move this wherever you want. So if we, for some reason, wanted just to see this part, we could just play that part. and we can go that way and see what's going on, right? So I'm going to go ahead, move it back to the beginning. Now we've got 2 seconds. So with that work area, you can also, if you had this set back where it was, and we got to where we want it to be, we can use N to bring the work area to that last point. So we can do that. Now I'm going to go one more frame. There we go. And then B is to set the beginning to a point. So if you did know you wanted just this part, instead of dragging it in, you could hit B for beginning and then N for end. That's how I kind of remember it. And then those two will work as well. So I'm going to go ahead there. Now a way to get this back to the beginning is we could just hit home and then hit B. And that gets our thing there. Now if we right click here, we can trim our entire composition to just the work area. So now if we do that, now our composition is only 2 seconds long, okay? And we can play through that. It's all there and it renders. Well, let's say we did want a background here. One of the easiest ways to get a background is just to do a new layer, a new solid object. So layer up here, new solid, or Control or Command Y. And then you can pick a color down here. Maybe we'll pick something there, hit OK. And make sure you just hit Make Comp Size. And then that will fill the area. Now the order over here does matter. So whatever's on top will be in front. So now if we come over here, we can do that. And maybe I'll go to my DAP layer here, click on my character panel, and let's get a little better color here maybe. That gives a little more contrast. Okay, there we go. All right. So if we've got this, it's coming up. And with that fade, we might want to adjust that a little bit. And again, it's really easy. Go to our opacity. This is our first keyframe. Maybe we want it to start fading in a little later. And so now you can see a little more of that fade happening. Or if you want it to fade on a little later, actually come to full opacity, and see how we can play with those. And the ease is let it settle right into place. And there we go. Now the last thing that we'd want to do is sort of get this out to some way that we could view it or post it somewhere. So we want to render it to a movie file or to a series of images. So what I'm going to do is go up here to Composition, and I am going to go to, you can go to Add to Render Queue or Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. I'm going to go to the Adobe Media Encoder Queue because there's more options. So if I click that, it will now open Adobe Media Encoder, which if you haven't opened it, it might take a few seconds to get things going. Once it's open, it's very fast, but it just has to open it up. And this is just sort of an additional encoder. So when you hear the term codec, codec stands for compression, decompression, and that's just the type of file it is. So if I come here and I look and I see that we have there's some things here that I had done before, so I can go ahead and just ignore those. But I can also click on one and just hit delete. And then the one before, delete. You should just have one that shows up. And we can see here, it's users, hey for desktop intro, AE intro, so that's fine. If you want to save it somewhere else, just click where you want it to go, and we can save this. So maybe desktop is fine, hit save. And here we can pick what codec we want. So I'm going to do H.264, which is great for the web. And here we've got match source, height, bitrate. That's usually fine as well. And when you click that for the first time, again, it'll take a few seconds. It'll open up, and here's where you can get a preview, and you can come in and do a lot of things. You can export audio or just video or just audio, etc. There's a lot of settings here. So I'm going to leave all of these as default here. We'll explore this more in other tutorials, but I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. And then to get this started, all you do is hit play. All right, and that's great. That just rendered. It says done. It's got a check mark. So what I'm going to do is just reveal output file, hit right click. And now I can come over here and here it is. And I'll preview that. And we've got a video that's just our DAP fading up, spinning in, and going there. So again, this is just the really simple, this is After Effects. And the next tutorial we'll get into a little more about keyframes and easing and some ways to adjust some of that. So thanks for watching.